Ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha. This is RIME, a game developed by Tequila Works and QLock. It is an exploration platformer that was released just a few days ago, and it's found itself being in a small controversy despite every indication of it being a good game. In spite of the troubles surrounding the game, I still felt it proper for me to play through some of it and at least render an opinion on the game itself. After all, I am a games critic, it's sort of my thing. So first off, the options menu. Going through the options menu, I saw nothing really missing other than color deficiency settings. Other than that, the game sports fully rebindable keys for both keyboard and controller, and also allows you to enable or disable advanced features like bloom, tessellation, anti-aliasing levels, set frame rates, and a decent number of other standard factors. It's a fairly robust menu for the style of game we're looking at, and I was left feeling reasonably optimistic going into the game proper. The game itself feels extremely similar to games like Abzu and Inside, as it follows along with your main character, a young boy who washes up on the shores of a strange island. In the first area of the game, the boy releases a magic fox who helps direct him through the island. As you overcome the puzzles of the game, you do notice from time to time a red-cloaked figure in the distance that you can never quite seem to be able to catch up to. This game is not voice-acted outside of the boy's shouts that I've been able to determine, relying more on visual and atmospheric imagery to depict the story. Now, this is a methodology of storytelling that is extremely easy to get wrong, and if not done right, it can ruin a game entirely. But thankfully, it seems the developers knew full well what they were doing and how best to go about it. The gameplay itself is fairly straightforward. This is very much a puzzle game, and is not a game that implements combat in any way. The game focuses on overcoming obstacles and solving puzzles in order to further your progression. The puzzles themselves involve a fairly simple orb or altar activation system with variations on a theme. With a few minor spikes, the overall progression in difficulty felt natural and well considered, and I found little to complain about in that regard with the exception of the collectibles. This was a bit of a misstep, I feel, from the developers. The reason behind that, it seems, the vast majority of the story content seems to be related through these collectibles, which sort of forces the player into being required to investigate every nook and cranny within the game in order to get the full measure of the story itself. Now, I'm sure there will be a certain amount of subjective opinion involved in whether or not this is a positive mechanic within the game, but I've always been of the type that feels that collectibles and the like should add something additional to the story or the gameplay mechanics themselves. But if someone is only interested in the story, then they're able to experience what the game has to offer without collectibles being a requirement for them to do so. This forcing the player into seeking out collectibles feels like a method of forcing an artificial extension or padding of the overall playtime, which I can certainly understand as the overall length of the gameplay is relatively short considering the game's asking price. It has been reported that a speedrun play length can last a mere 3 to 4 hours, but your average play length is going to clock in somewhere closer to the 10 to 15 hour time frame, which, considering the general lack of player agency involved in the story itself, marks the game as having an exceptionally low replayability factor, which makes me severely question whether or not the game is a worthwhile purchase at its current $30 price point. Also, the game in its current form is not free of issues. The game does have some fairly significant problems running on certain graphics cards, in particular the AMD RX 580, the GTX 900 series, and the GTX 1080 video cards. Indeed, on my GTX 1080 Ti, I have noticed some fairly significant frame rate issues that seem to be directly tied to the SSAA anti-aliasing, where the RX 580s seem to have problems across the board with the game, and the 900 series GTX cards have reported a marked increase in performance by setting VSync to double buffering. Now, this is a problem that I'm sure the developers are diligently working on correcting, but it is a problem nonetheless, and something consumers should most definitely be made aware of before they purchase the game. There is also the matter of that mild controversy that I mentioned earlier. It is the fact that this game makes use of Denuvo, the DRM anti-piracy software that has a great deal of gamers shrinking away from this game, much like vampires shying away from the sunlight. I know this is a fairly inaccurate comparison, but bear with me. Now, Denuvo, for those of you that are not aware, has been accused in the past of some extremely significant performance issues, and it has also been attributed to a great deal of performance problems with other games in the past. It has also been widely commented on, although never actually proven from what I've been able to gather, that Denuvo caused severe harm to SSD drives in particular, causing nearly 40 gigabytes of information to be written to a drive over the course of a single hour. In case you're unfamiliar with how solid-state drive technology works, they use microchip technology to store data. Many have likened it to RAM, although that is very much a false equivalency in the type of memory that is used. RAM is very much what is called volatile memory, whereas SSDs do not make use of volatile memory. However, SSDs do have a limited number of read-write operations that can be performed before you start to suffer burnout, which results in an ever-diminishing storage capacity until it reaches a point of critical failure. With a sustained empty read-write process like the one described above, it would very much cause significant wear on the SSD and unnecessarily shorten its lifespan. Indeed, the stigma surrounding Denuvo has caused it to be a very untrusted DRM system by consumers. However, let me just say that while the game does have frame rate issues on my system, I've been running the game minimized in the background while I've been recording this video this whole time, and I can qualitatively state that as my operating system, recording drive, and game installation drives are all separate, that Denuvo in this instance is not causing any undue wear and tear on any of my SSDs at all. In fact, the only drive utilization at the moment is indeed my audio recording software. Now, I realize this is by no means definitive or conclusive, but it is quite clearly not running a risk of causing my drives to fail. However, there is still the concern that Denuvo might be causing the performance issues in general. Now, I find myself to be highly skeptical of this, and there seems to be so many conflicting reports out there that I really can't offer an educated insight into this, as quite literally all the information out there seems to be contradictory, and as such, I just simply cannot be relied upon. So, as that is the case, I would have to say that I'm not worried, as so many people seem to be, about the game's use of Denuvo. I'm more worried about the game's performance issues, the requirements it places on the players in order to experience the game's story, which is crucial to a story-driven experience such as this, and with the general lack of replay value as a whole. But when it boils down to it, I am having fun with the game, and I do look forward to completing it, but for its current $30 asking price, I do feel the game is poor value for the money, and my personal recommendation would be to wait until the game comes down to around $20. Then I feel it will be far more acceptable for what we're giving here. Please feel free to let me know what you think. Do you think a game with roughly 13 hours of gameplay time is worth $30? Do you feel trepidation over the game's use of Denuvo? Do you have any information to share with everyone in regards to anything discussed here in this video? Please feel free to let us know down in the comments below. And while you're at it, if you could be so kind as to drop a like and share on this video, the master and ruler of all, which let's face it is my daughter, would greatly appreciate it, and if you could remember to subscribe, that would be just icing on the cake. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha, and I'll see you next time.